Welcome. We have a special edition of Cirak Live. It's our global transmission night. What makes this episode special is that many of the writings, many of the teachings, many of the sessions we've done together in the past, and the recordings that you'll find on YouTube and other places, if you're a member of Cirak.com, are about personal development. They focus very much on the individual. There are two parts to awakening. One is the one that you hear talked about most of the time, and that is the personal awakening to your true essence. That is the waking up from the projections, the conditioning, the thinking that you are you, that you are your body, that you are your name, your job, your title, your achievements, the things you own, all these things that we weave into the story of me. And then we live from that place, those few slivers of conditioned identity that we create naturally. Everyone is subject to this. It's a world that we come into. Suddenly we find ourselves in our bodies, having just been in spirit form a moment ago, and trying to adjust and make sense of it all. We tend to lose ourselves in the physical dimension, and that's okay. It all has a purpose. The awakening part that we rarely talk about, if ever, and which is a subject of my latest book that you just saw, God is a Conservative, How Divine Order Restores Itself. This is hardly ever talked about. And that is the world that you see through awakened eyes. It's not just who you are, the reality of your own true being, but the reality of what's happening out there. And this waking up to what is happening in the world and what constitutes the foundation and the basis for much of modern living can be as upsetting, as upheavaling, as traumatic as the personal awakening. So much so that I often talk about it as the second awakening. So the first one is focusing on yourself. Oh my gosh, I'm not this form that I thought I was. I am the formless. I am the awareness of those things. That's what we are. If you're looking for meaning, it can't be found in the external. It can't be found in the achievement and the chasing of happiness and the assembly, the manifestation of a certain environment, certain circumstances. Those circumstances are subject to change because the nature of life is change. And we are meant to grow. We're not here to just sit around and do nothing, sit around and be comfortable. No one has ever awakened from convenience. So this personal growth is very internal. And when you go through that, when you have your dark night of the soul, when you do enough inner work to release the triggers and the attachments, the expectations, and the control, when you truly surrender, when you truly accept who you are, where you are, and you've done enough of that, then you naturally start to look around into the world, and then you see what's going on out there. And this is especially the case for what's going on right now. We have a crescendo, if you will, happening of what I call the mind-identified state. So living by higher self, living by your intuition, living by your connection to your body and allowing wisdom to direct your actions. That's what we call in the latest book, God consciousness, is having some connection to source and being in the co-creation state. And the absence of God consciousness is the mind identified state, thinking you have to make it all happen, that you're all alone in this, that life is this big scary monster out to get you. There's scarcity. You have to fight for your slice of the pie, otherwise you wind up with nothing. Mind identity believes in form. Only what can be seen is real. Mind identified state is based on extraction, looking what benefit can I get from this situation? What benefit can I get out of this relationship, out of this job, out of even just going to the parking lot and getting the best spot there? Everyone becomes an enemy when we're in the mind identified state. So today we're going to point out what a world looks like. And you don't have to look far, you just have to look around to see just how much of the modern life, modern world is a result of decades, but really centuries of mind identification. And you can see it in every aspect of modern living. And this can be the second awakening, the shock of realizing just how far removed the modern life is from connection to source, from having an understanding of higher consciousness, God consciousness, an understanding of we're all one, coming from the same source. We're just in different bodies, different stations in life. And what a world would look like if those aspects were considered and respected and honored. So it's not just to see everything that's upside down out there, but also to recognize the purpose of it. And it has a deep, deep purpose. And we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to address a handful of the things that when we look around that we see out there. The very first thing is how we truly, truly are manufactured to be in our minds. And that is especially a result of education. Now, there are schools and different programs. Waldorf is an example that focus more on the being of the person, not so much their external form. But I think we can all look there and see that the majority of education, especially higher education, it shrinks your perspective. It replaces curiosity with fear. It creates, instead of potential and outlook of everything's possible, it creates scarcity. Instead of honing the qualities that make for an enlightened life, for a deep, meaningful existence, things such as meditation, things as mindfulness, things as living in our body, connected to our sensations, understanding our inner truth, seeing the soul in other people, recognizing the mission that they're on, the soul contract, if you will, that they have, living from a support of each other, creating a world, a society that isn't hyper-regulated by law, which is meant to replace God consciousness, but rather one that is based on truth, actual truth, felt truth, universal law. And you look around and you don't see that anywhere. Most of us, including myself, discovered meditation and mindfulness much later in life, after running the course and running on the hamster wheel and living for the external. And decades can go by. And of course, it has its purpose in that there's a contrast that builds up, a pressure from being misaligned, from being so focused on the external world that we eventually crash or create physical illness, mental illness, depression, anxiety start taking hold. And even there, the effort by modern life is to numb those things, to convey the idea that you're the problem, that you're not able to cope with these conditions that are, in large part, you can describe as inhumane, or at very least disconnected, that because you're not able to deal with that, you're the problem and you need to be fixed. You need to pop a pill or go see a shrink every week. That is not to say that all of that is detrimental, all of that is missing the point, but most of it is. Most of the things we then are told we need to do to cover up the misalignment only reinforce the misalignment and create even more of it. We'll talk about what the world would look like if it was aligned in the second part, but we'll point out just the misalignment, the inversion, if you will, for the first part of today's talk. So education is a big one. We just touched on laws making, how hyper legal regulation is meant to control all of our behavior, all of our thoughts, all of our speech. It's governance without God. It's having people in place who are not connected to their conscience. It's having leaders who just continue following some agenda, some identity, and also in large part for their own material enrichment and status. And that's always been the case, but it's really, really obvious when you see the landscape, the political landscape, with God consciousness, with awakened eyes, from a higher self perspective. There's hardly a figure out there that you can say reports to their conscience. When you have people connected to their conscience, then everything changes, because you can only treat others the way you treat yourself. And if you're able to distort your own truth, lie to yourself, look the other way, when your person is up for debate, for manipulation, for rewards, for saying this or doing that, then the result is instability and chaos and continued exploitation of population, other countries, nature. Without conscience, we don't know how to act. And you can put as many laws in place as you want, that will not replace your connection to source. It's that connection to universal truth, universal law, that both regulates our personal behavior, but that is what we extend to others. You can only love others to the degree that you love yourself. So it can be hard to look out there and see so many people in charge of many important institutions, and they look like they're completely devoid of love. They don't love themselves, they don't love each other. And even if that word is even spoken, it's very rarely genuine. Another big trap, another big inversion of the modern age is the cult of progress, as I call it. This addiction to thinking that as long as we're doing something, as long as we're inventing new things, growing the economy, and having some kind of technological advancement, even if it's just new phone models every year or car models or different gadgets. And we somehow have fallen into that. The mind falls into the idea that this is what progress means. And you can see it all around. It's a manic race to create the next gadget, the next electronic service. And none of it, I would say very little of it, has true meaning when it comes to living a connected state. I get comments all day long, including my own observations, how modern life is no simpler. If anything, it's more chaotic, that all these inventions promised us ease and convenience and a simpler life, and reality is far from it. It's become impossible to jump through all the different hurdles, legal hurdles, technical hurdles, to just do basic things in life. So the over bureaucratization, the over regulation, and the constant immersion in the next thing, in the next invention, consume us. And we start to feel really lost. Again, when we look for meaning in the material world, you will not find it. You will feel lost. You will feel disoriented. Those things have their place. They're amazing. That we can create things, and they've come through us as creation. But the things we create in a true co-creative process, aligned with sustaining and conserving that which is meaningful, look very different. You can look at most of the inventions of the modern age, and it's very questionable what meaning they have, if any at all, in supporting living in alignment, living with universal truth, understanding ourselves better, helping in the journey of self-realization, moving us towards a place where we're less entangled with the environment and more at peace, more in stillness. If anything, all the progress that we hear and see and talk about creates more noise. Something to look at in your environment, where you're sitting, the gadgets you use every day, even just getting into a car that you haven't driven before, you don't even know where all the buttons are. Has that really made things simpler? Now, this is also not a call to return to the past, not at all. It's a call to return to what's effective, what works. And we'll talk about the bigger picture, the bigger meaning of the chaos out there in just a moment. Once you have these gadgets in place and the constant technological innovation in place, big economies start to sprout. And these are all essentially economies of illusion. They put up goals and milestones and things you need to achieve, things that are supposed to bring you meaning, that are all based on products or services or lifestyles that are being sold to us, that are not ultimately important, that are not helping us reflect and stay connected, but more that are pulling us into our head, making us more reactive, more comparative. What does the next person have? They have the newest model. I need to get it too. There's entire economies. It's hard to think of one that is truly, truly conducive for human well-being, that has true well-being at its core. And again, a lot of that has to do with the overall exploitative, extractive nature of the world that the mind has created. Going back decades and decades, there's a systematic dismantling of the things that nurture the soul, nurture the being in this world, and an increased control over how we think, how we feel, what we're supposed to do in this life. One of those things is the fracturing of the family. This is the place from which we learn what is consciousness. And families have become very fractured. Not that they always haven't been a place of challenge, but you can see how children have been systematically taken away from the home and now educated in a industry perspective way. Workers are needed, and we provide a certain role, a cutout, a degree, and for which we're then raised and honed to fit that mold. And when our soul starts crying out that this way of life is not as nurturing as it was sold to us, then we're told we're a problem, pop some pills, get back to work. I've yet to see a company that offers enlightenment leave. If you know one, to shoot me a message. And that's probably because deep down there's an understanding, if we were given the space, the breathing room to reflect on our true nature, reflect on what we really need as beings, what we're here to do as beings, as spiritual beings, then we would probably not live the way we are being told to live. And so we have to be kept small and distracted and in a coping kind of state so that we don't wake up. And when you start looking around with aware eyes, you see that pressure, you feel it from everywhere. And with this fragmentation of the family, which the only autonomous unit in which consciousness can be raised, the nest in which we are born into, when that fragments, we become more controllable, we become more manipulable, we become more conditioned by the great machinery that then sets out to direct our life. We're either living from a nurturing, conscious, warm, understanding, compassionate environment from which we learn through greater consciousness, from which we learn from conscious educators, conscious parents, conscious legislators, and the rules and the absence of rules and the processes that conscious beings create. We're either living and learning and growing up from that awareness, or we're learning and growing up from trauma, from disconnect, from the pain of others. And most of modern life and all the workshops and private sessions and in my own upbringing and looking around is that we've created a world, the mind identified state has created a world in which most people learn and grow from trauma. That is a way, because it shows us in a different orientation where we should be going, but it's hard, and it doesn't have to be that way. A truly aware and conscious environment can nurture our soul and our being in far more effective ways than having to go through feeling so cut off, feeling so lost, spending decades of our life silently longing for something that is true, something that is permanent, something that isn't up for change at the whim of some other person's agenda. So the world would look very differently if it was run with greater connection to source. Health is another big issue. I call it the cult of health, and where we start to treat the body as a machine, a problem. Whenever it breaks down, it's because it's unreliable, never really looking at the root source of why it breaks down in the first place. Especially in the West, medicine has taken a symptom-driven approach. Just treat the symptoms. We've all seen that and heard that, but you have to really look at the structures of the type of healthcare that is provided. And in large part, it misses all the important things. Those things are not covered. Holistic, naturopathic, and more energy and soul insight that goes into treating every individual for the individual that they are, and not just the 7 minutes that a doctor has to diagnose you according to some chart and pre-existing protocol. Over time and over scale, those things lead to just more illness, more sickness. And when the body's frail, when the body's ill, when we're suffering, we all have had this experience. When we're sick, our awareness suffers. We have to lose ourselves in the protocols that are created for us, and we don't have the space to deal with what's important, to connect with source, to maintain a connection to presence, to be in a state of trust, to feel nurtured by that connection. All of that falls away when we're struggling physically, when our bodies are not healthy, when our mind isn't healthy. And you look out there and nothing really is designed to heal, to truly heal. Those who truly heal, in fact, often have economic woes, because in an overall system that is designed to keep you unhealthy, it's hard to make money and sustain a livelihood when you're actually healing people. So the entire system is upside down. It's an age of inversion. There's a few small exceptions that I've heard of where getting healthy is actually incentivized. And if you think about it, there would be no reason for that not to be possible. It actually saves money. It saves human error. It saves absenteeism. It saves disagreement and emotional, physical turmoil in families and friendships and partnerships and the workplace. And everything would be better if it was actually a world oriented towards true healing. And true healing is absolutely possible. Another, we'll do one or two more of the symptoms of the modern age of inversion, is this idea of freedom, of choice. Again, it's just the mind identified state that thinks that the more choice we have, the more free we are. But that's not how energy works. The more choice we have, the more confused we get. There's even extensive research on choice overload and analysis paralysis. When we are presented with too much choice, we actually suffer. Life does not get better. Yet you look around and every billboard, every commercial, around every corner, we are being bombarded by choice. And instead of making us more free, it winds up enslaving us, thinking we're not happy that it's because we haven't chosen well. Certain income, certain belongings, to think that once we have those things, when we buy and choose from a variety of decades can go by before we realize that it doesn't make us more free. Ultimately, it's all a pre-selected series of options that stem from a world built on mind identification. You cannot escape the consequences of an extractive system, one that is built on taking away freedom, even if it sells you the innumerable choice options as freedom. You will only find yourself more entangled with the illusion of choice. All of this, of course, leads to, and we'll make this the last point, a kind of crisis of faith. When we become so pulled into the material world, into achievement, into chasing our happiness, into thinking we're going to find ourselves in the options that we're presented, options that are primarily there to keep us occupied, to keep us distracted. There's no freedom, there's no enlightenment, if you will, to be found in choices that are constrictive in nature to begin with. And it leads to a type of crisis of, what are we doing here? What is my purpose? What is this world all about? Again, it can take years and decades of these questions lingering as we chase outcomes that we're told will make us happy, to realize that they don't. And a lot of time can go by before we encounter a voice or a book or a group that actually talks more truth of what is actually happening out there. What is a way of living that nurtures our soul, nurtures our spirit, that life on earth is meant to become clear in our energy, in our intention, to peel back the layers of conditioning and find what's underneath and not just stay at the surface. So many acts that you see out there by people who are troubled, and because they're so tied into the mind identified state, if you look really closely, you can see how, let's take the most extreme example of paranoia or schizophrenia, mental illness. It's just an intense, extreme identification with thoughts, so that you can't even say that you have the space to question a thought about what you're seeing or what you're perceiving. When you're so glued to your thoughts, it comes out as extreme mental illness. And most fortunately are not in that extreme state of mind identification, but for most people, they're on that path, along that way of mind identification, and it creates a subset of suffering that you can see in a handful of cases where it really, really goes overboard and it becomes extremely destructive towards themselves and towards others. No one talks about how all of the chaos in the world, all the injustice that we see that is done, comes from people who live in their heads, who believe their thoughts. All ideologies are a result of believing a certain set of arbitrary thoughts and starting to live by it. And when you have power and influence, impose that on others and use that for your own benefit and for the exploitation of others. There's a clear lack of clarity when you look out into the world that the source of human suffering is the over-identification with thoughts. And the absence, that is as a result of that, of connection to source, of God consciousness, of conscience, reporting to your conscience. And the truth that arises from there, that is natural law. The truth that arises there, that is everyone's truth. The truth that arises from there, that sees beyond the surface matters of what is ultimately an incredible gift of creation, the diversity of how people see and their exterior, their genders, their culture. That's all amazing. But when it's used by the mind to create division, then it's not so amazing. When you can see that as expression of consciousness, but connect actually to the deeper person, the essence of the person within, then those surface differences only become celebrations. They become an expression of awe and wonder and amazement of how this world is always trying to create new things. And it's always testing its own limits. And it conserves when it comes back to the truth of what really works. Hence the title. God is a conservative from the perspective of allowing constant expansion and exploration and information gathering to take place, but then returning to what works, to what is real, to what is truthful, but with greater awareness. And that is the key piece. Nothing is wrong in this world. Nothing is a mistake. Nothing shouldn't be happening. But the great purpose that darkness has, that this addiction to progress has, the progressive mind, is to realize what doesn't work and to come back to what is truthful. And that's not something from the past. It's something that is always within, vertically, deep within us. Our connection to source is independent of time or technology or the era we're born in, independent of social systems or political systems. It is our natural state of being that has been lost in the world out there. The natural state of feeling connected and trusting of life, the natural state of having an inner resonance as your guidance system, instead of the monkey mind that negotiates and constantly seeks validation. The truth of recognizing that we're a drop in the ocean, and even though we have our own identities, the little human as I call it, there is a greater force, a greater intelligence behind everything. Everything that the mind thinks is a problem is actually a signal to go deeper, be it finding yourself in a state of boredom. This is an invitation for a new chapter to take hold, not what the mind thinks that you're not being productive. When we're trying to rest, that it's restorative, that we're regenerating our energy, and that it's essential, not what the mind thinks that you're being lazy or unreliable and that you can't be seen by others. When you are guided to show up and respond to what's there and actually co-create with the happening of life as it unfolds, with the magic, with the unknown, not with the trying to control every outcome, predict every possible permutation, and then when things happen differently, getting upset. The difference between the mind-identified life and the one based on God consciousness couldn't be more extreme. One leads to darkness and chaos, an inversion of truth. The other leads to a flourishing, a finding of eternal peace, a world where you want to be of service, economies that support the giving and the coming together of people. And so we look around to the world out there, especially in this day, and we see a lot of mind identification. We see a lot of people who run around, groups of people who form ideologies and concepts and try to force that upon each other. And it couldn't be farther from being in a connected, source-led state. Now, coming to the purpose, as I alluded earlier, that all of this has, especially in these times, you can't even read a LinkedIn job board without seeing people express dismay, at the very least, if not utter frustration and disbelief and pain from what's happening out there. A clear disorientation of what is this world turning into, what's happening. And this is where we have to recognize that everything is a test. Everything is a return to source, a return to truth. And just when we're in the middle of it, it may not be the most pleasant experience. But ultimately, the darkness is what teaches us to see light. And it doesn't take many people to hold the torch, to be the light bearers, the frequency holders, to keep the world from tilting too far. And we do have a time right now where that is an absolute must, where you can no longer do your own thing and let the rest of the world just figure it out. When you can no longer sit on the fence and just like, we'll see what happens. This is a time where we must hold our position. We must stand in truth. We must shine our light everywhere we go with greater strength and determination than we might originally have thought we would be called to do. So there's a deep strengthening in that, a deep return to going deeper, finding truth, connecting with your essence, so that you can go out there and stand firm, so that you can spread the message that those who are not currently in that state have something to look forward to. Now, it's a place of reverting back and conserving back into what works with greater awareness than ever before. And so these cycles of expansion and collapse that have happened all across time, we're in an extreme one right now because truth has been stretched to the point of inversion. It is all pointing us back to a place of connectedness with greater stability and greater connection and greater absence of being corrupted than ever before. And we're all going through this process right now in the world on searching and returning to the ultimate truth of living with God consciousness, living in a connected state with your conscience and inner truth. So the call is to be part of the 10 or 20% that can hold that frequency for the rest, so that it doesn't tilt too far. It doesn't have to be everyone, but just enough to balance out the darkness that inevitably then returns to light. And even for those of us who feel challenged as frequency holders of whether this is really worth it, remember, as long as we're in human form, we're not perfect. There's even in the challenge of being a light bearer, a deep lesson to be found from the darkness. We always, at every point in life, are being tested in our attachments to form versus our connection to source, our attachment to body and shape and the physical and the material versus the trust and surrender and the acceptance that comes from giving ourselves over and be of service to our conscience, to a higher self, to be living a life led from intuition and authenticity. And the ultimate lesson in this surrender is to test, can we stay in the surrendered and the connected state when the world grows so dark? Can we maintain our connection and our trust and our higher self and higher consciousness when the world is not a good place to be? That is the ultimate challenge. Those who already have some light in them are already in the path. When you look out onto this world, can you maintain the light within the darkness? So with that said, I want to use the rest of the time to see if we have any questions. Yes, a place of truth and connectedness We are frequency holders. The most important thing is to have a forum, to have a space where you can come together like this one, where you can speak truth, where you can be authentic and open and talk about what matters and the struggles that we have in taking that frequency out into the darkness, taking our higher consciousness into the lower consciousness realm and holding our ground. And yes, we are trying. Trying is not just enough, it's more than enough. As long as we are noticing even our flaws, we are coming at it from consciousness, from awareness. Being aware that you're not enlightened is being enlightened. It's shifting out of form needing to be a certain way. It's coming out of our conditions that we attach to the material, the physical world, so that we can feel a certain way, so that we can believe a certain way. And learning to accept things as they are, see things as they are, respond to things as they are. Then you're actually in the enlightened state, noticing your imperfections. And as humans, will always be imperfect. It's our nature to be imperfect, otherwise there wouldn't be any growth. But to be aware of the imperfection takes you out of identification with the imperfection, takes you out of the need to fix yourself or solve the problem that you are, takes you out of the illness, the mentality that creates in us, and puts you into the awareness state, the connected state, the flowing state. So whatever happens, you noticing it, you being aware of it, is the elevated state, is the higher state. The contents of our circumstances is almost irrelevant. It's a far distant secondary. It really doesn't matter. If you're standing in line at the supermarket or you just reach the summit of Mount Everest, doesn't matter. Are you present? Are you connected to source? That is what matters. The contents, it can please us temporarily, of course. It's not to be diminished. We should celebrate things we achieve, and we should notice when the celebration fades and just carry on. So being in that state of awareness everywhere we go is bringing the light of awareness, the light of consciousness, the frequency of higher being everywhere we go. And this is how we spread the love for being created, for being vessels for creation and co-creation. And you don't have to change anything in your life. You don't have to quit your job or move to another city or leave a relationship or try to somehow run away from what you're doing because it's not resonating. Learn to do what you're already doing in an intentional, present, connected way. And if then it tells you you should move on or make changes, that's fine. But that is the difference between a source-led life, where the motivations come from clarity, compared to what a mind-identified life results in, which is full of reactivity, full of judgment, full of resistance. We sit with the discomfort, stay with whatever arises, staying present and be aware of the process of the discomfort. That discomfort feeling will dissolve. Yes. It is a beautiful design of life that when we allow discomfort to be, first we notice that most of the discomfort that we felt before was actually our resistance to it. So the fear that some people have in feeling their feelings exposes itself to be mostly induced again by a reactive and judgmental mind that pushes away discomfort and says, I don't want to feel this. I should not be feeling this. Things should be different. Total state of reaction and resistance. So when that energy falls away, you realize the discomfort isn't so bad at all. In fact, the discomfort has a lesson, a message. It's saying something is misaligned. It's saying, look elsewhere. It's saying, find a different perspective. It's saying, maybe you need a break. Take a step back. So with God consciousness, we see all these surface matters as signals to go deeper, to look within. Whereas in the mind-identified state, we stay stuck in fear and rejection, jealousy, anger, control, lack, not feeling like you're good enough, scarcity consciousness. All the yucky stuff comes from living in our head. And therein also lies the beauty of, with greater awareness, we can recognize those symptoms. We no longer identify with them, oh, it's me that's the problem, but rather, oh, I feel stuck. What does it point to? Oh, I feel blocked. What does it want me to do really? Oh, I feel depression moving through my body. Where am I not aligned in my life? It's just one extra step, because mind identification is not our natural state. It's to notice the symptoms of being disconnected and then taking action to correct them. So again, the mind gets caught up on what has just happened, lingering, amplifying, getting stuck, prolonging, extending the shelf life of something that has long passed. Sometimes we live with these things for decades. Whereas God consciousness accepts what has happened and looks for the lesson, looks for the meaning, looks for the direction that we're being provided by a higher intelligence. It's a very different life. Yes, motivation from clarity. So with that said, I'll scroll through the comments for just a moment and see if there's any other questions. Yes, thumbs up. Oh, thank you for all the emojis. All right. Coming back to the single most important activity, the single most important practice that we can participate in, which is to nurture our awareness muscle. Oh, can you talk about alignment? Okay, before we go into tonight's closing meditation. Alignment, living in truth, when we try to figure that out from the mind, we don't get clear answers. The mind is good for some things. It's looking out for threat, for danger. It wants to keep us safe. That's fine. It has its purpose. But if we're always in our mind, then we're always in the future looking for potential threats. And then our whole life gets colored by that. And then we become controllable and susceptible by forces out there that don't want consciousness. The acceptance and pure surrender that is required of us also requires forces out there that one could call anti-life, that one might describe as evil. It's only there to test the mettle of how far and how ready we are to truly, truly surrender to the light, to living a life of alignment. And right now is the ultimate test as a society, as a species. So the answer does not lie in trying to understand what alignment is, but in understanding the mechanism of life's design, in that it teaches us alignment through our feelings. When we're in our head, it's just the monkey mind at work. But feelings, sensations, tell us what is aligned and what not. Those sensations can show up as different aspects of the body for different people. You can call it an inner voice. Some people see shapes and colors. They have flashes of impressions. Whatever it may be, we all have a deep down inner sense when we say no when we were supposed to say yes. We all deep down have some divine intelligence that communicates to us that what I'm doing right now it's just not working. There's resistance in the world that the mind identified world tells you to dig in deeper, to work harder, to roll up your sleeves, to not complain, to make it happen, just do it. The subliminal message is in everything. But to shift from out of the head into body connectedness, body awareness. And from that place, you can feel very quickly what is aligned and what isn't. And there's a greater truth that is universal law, that is source connectedness, that you could say is the main pillars even of the traditional religions. They talk about these untouchable truths of honoring our body, each other, of life, of nature, and conserving all the principles of balance that exist in the world. And then there's the personal truth that is more purpose and blueprint related. So what are you here to do? How are you here to express that greater consciousness in your own unique way? And that could be as a parent, that could be as a partner, that could be as a team lead at work, that could be as a social worker or in your community. Whatever it is, it comes from a state of being in service to others. This is what brings us closer. This is what dissolves divisive energies, dark energies, exploitive energies, and realigns us all individually and collectively with our common source. The purpose of this time around, of why we're here in this lifetime. And that requires a feelings and spiritually connected population and connected people in leadership positions that can, their connectedness is reflected in the policies that they make. And that is the greatest contribution. If you want to go sit on a mountain and meditate forever, that's fine too, if someone feels called to that. But it's really bringing the light of your awareness into everyday life, that where we engage with life, with the unfolding. That's where the divine rejoices, because it gets to create us as vessels, as co-creators, in a aligned, authentic way. When that alignment ceases, when we lose ourselves in thought, everything shuts down. We can see that very quickly. When I'm writing and it's me writing, when I get too much in my head, the writing flow stops instantly. And when it does, I don't berate myself. I notice the symptom and the signal and the call to go deeper, to maybe take a break, to reconnect to the body, to change the energy of the room, to look at things from other perspectives. It's an invitation to greater consciousness, and to use that mindset, if you will, in every situation that we encounter, to be a student of life, that everyone is our teacher, and that the people that trigger us the most are actually our biggest teachers. They've come along to point to things that are so deep within us, that challenge us to let go and dissolve and heal our deepest wounds. Very often that's our biological family. And to recognize this design of life, to seek out our soul family for comfort and stability and sharing, and so that we don't feel like we're crazy in places like this forum. Just reorienting your whole life towards alignment, you can see, will demand a restructuring of many things that you do, many of your patterns. We all have that in us where we recognize an unhealthy pattern. I shouldn't be doing this. Why did I do this again? Why am I finding myself in the same life situation or in the same type of relationship? And we notice these things at the surface, but we never go deeper. We take them at surface value. We're trained to think that we're wrong and trained to educate it into pointing fingers and blame and the pressure of achieving milestones to be seen worthy by the world around us. And so to sift through that and adopt the connection, the ever-growing connection that everything is an invitation to become more self-aware, that is what we're here for. And the more tumultuous the world is, the bigger the invitation, the more important it is that we honor that invitation to live in alignment, to stand in truth, and to be a beacon of life and light to others. And what that exactly looks like, only you will know. But if you scan your day-to-day, how are you spending your time? What are you giving your attention to? That which we give our attention to, we become. What we consume through our perceptions is what we put into ourselves energetically. And now we carry that energetic charge through life. We bring that into all the things, all the situations and relationships that we have. So with greater awareness, noticing, being more vigilant, being more aware of what news sources are we consuming, what type of people and potential toxicities are we exposing ourselves to, where can we improve our boundaries, where are we living in complexity, where are we in resistance. It's never about wanting to become somebody you're currently not. Then you're sending the ultimate form of self-harm to the cells in you by saying, I'm not good enough, I don't want to be here, I should be somebody better. Imagine the message that sends to your entire being that you don't want to be who you are, where you are right now. Learning to accept and then work with who you are, where you are right now. That is what turns the whole table on the mind identified state, and moves us into alignment through awareness, through God consciousness. To say, like, this is where I am, these are the lessons that are presenting themselves to me, these are the opportunities for greater growth, for greater connection. Noticing the parts that we're struggling with immediately disidentifies, immediately takes us out of the power that we give those things over us. Simply by noticing, simply by, I'm aware that I'm not perfect. I'm aware that I'm not enlightened. I'm aware that I struggle with this or that. That awareness is where you want to be. Let the body and the mind be imperfect. They always will be, and they'll cycle and come and go, and some ups and downs. But as long as you're aware of all of that, aware of the physical strife, and aware of the successes, you're doing it. You're being aware. You're living higher consciousness. And that's what we're all here for. And it begins with little things. When something happens, to maybe inject a little breathing space. Say to yourself, well, let's see what happens next. Say to yourself, I'm going to withhold judgment, and I'm going to wait to see what this means. And then the next moment comes along and you continue. I'm going to wait to see what this means. It's only the mind that wants to assign meaning, that wants finality, that wants totality, that wants to define what's right and what's wrong, what's true or false. It's only the mind that wants an end state, an outcome. Life is continuous. You are continuous. And so this mindset of I'm going to wait to see what this means has no end. There will never come the point when you know what it means. And the higher self knows that you can't know what anything means from a dualistic, judgmental perspective. It may seem beneficial one moment and then turn out to be a detriment. And it may seem to be a disaster, and then later you realize it was a gift. So learning to flow, learning to see things as they are, respond as we are, give yourself that space, that breathing room to allow it to be, and never come out of that state. Never get to the point where, oh, now I know what it means. If anything, we can look back on our life and we can see the intelligence at work. We can see the pieces that the journey, the path that has been full of twists and turns and detours. They're only detours because the mind wants it a certain way. If we take the mind need for control out of it, then it's just the path. You've been on your path the whole time. Okay. All right. I'm all about practical spirituality, all about what can we do next. And as I alluded to earlier, a moment ago, becoming aware of our thoughts is the single most important thing to come out of mind identification. We are surrounded by a world built on and for the mind, built by and for lower levels of awareness. So we have to do the work. We have to take control of our happiness. And that is one of the key moments of shifting, of turning the corner, when we realize no one's going to come to save us. No one's going to create rules or laws or an environment that suits us perfectly and that will never change. No one's going to heal us for us, but rather we have to do that work. And the good news is that it only depends on us. No one can get in the way of that. It's as simple as how much you invest in your own healing and your own growth, and that's what you get back. It depends on no one else. So this mind identification is the big challenge, is the world that we see out there. And you don't have to go very far to see how detrimental it is, how it takes society and civilization to the brink, to the edge of its own existence. Even if it jumps off the cliff, it will survive, but those who are here who can be frequency holders, hold the torch and be candle bearers. It's our responsibility to nurture our awareness, to grow that awareness muscle, and carry it out there wherever we go. The easiest, simplest exercise, I call it thought awareness. Those who are more familiar with meditation, I've heard Anapana or Anapanasati. And it's simply an exercise of observing our thoughts. You can do it for 1 minute, 10 minutes. You can do it for an hour, however much time you have. It's growing an awareness muscle of living and seeing and experiencing your thoughts from your awareness, not getting identified with them, not getting pulled into them, not being at the mercy of every thought that comes along in this incessant, endless stream of thoughts, and letting it jerk us around. If you take a closer look, again, with awareness, you can see most thoughts are negative. They're the mind trying to find something that's wrong. Most thoughts are repetitive. So this is how we wind up looping and looping and not being able to sleep at night. Replaying old scenarios, thinking, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. Next time it happens, I'm going to do this, I'm going to act this way. And then that next time is always different. No two moments repeat. So awareness of our thoughts is the key to coming out of mind-identified state for ourselves, and to bring the energy, the frequency of alignment that cultivates with God consciousness into our life, into our relationships with other people, friends, family, co-workers, partners. If you can just find 1 or 2 moments a day, for as little as 30 seconds, that's enough to maintain a little space, a little crack through which the light can shine in. It takes incredible effort, constant scrolling, constant distraction, constant coping, constant numbing to keep this light out. Again, these are the goods that were sold. These are the lifestyles that were sold of constant distraction. But with just a little tweaking, we can create some breathing room, some space for the light to shine in. And that's enough to keep us from going off the deep end, jumping off the ledge, losing our sanity. And a little extra more, suddenly you're living life, seeing life from a very different perspective, from a place of awareness. You've now assumed the path of the real purpose of our existence, using the material world to engage with as a mirror, but not as the ultimate destination. And then ultimately, when we approach life as a mirror of our blind spots, of our unconsciousness, eventually it dissolves, and then we really see the world just as it is. We see people as they are, with their own imperfections, their own woundedness of what motivates them, and we don't get our own attachments and expectations entangled with that. That's when you can move through the world and not feel triggered by anything. Things just are the way they are because you see them clearly. So the incentive to cultivate greater awareness couldn't be greater. There is so much to benefit from, even just a little bit more light in one's life, a little more connection to higher consciousness. And everything starts to shift, because ultimately that is our natural state. We're not meant to be small and anxious and stuck and fearful and always on the lookout for what could go wrong. That's not our natural state. We're meant to be inspired, full of gratitude, in awe of the miracle of our own existence as vessels and co-creators of everything that wants to express itself from the formless, coming through us into form, giving its shape with our voice, our experience, our history, dancing, co-creating with life, if you will. So this thought awareness meditation, we'll do it for 10 minutes. It will take you all the way. Ram Dass, at the end of his life, after all the experimentation with substances, with different techniques, with different putting himself through different phases and experiences, he wound up that this is all you need. It's as simple as life is designed to be, is to live from awareness. And the contents of the life as it's happening, as it continues to happen, as it will always unfold in this way or that way, sometimes pleasant, sometimes unpleasant, will just continue without it impacting how you feel. To live from awareness, to no longer be at the mercy of your environment for how you feel. So, with that said, we're going to close our eyes, close our mouth. We're going to bring our attention to the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of our nostrils. There's a sensitive area below the nostrils and above the upper lip where you can feel the touch of your breath. And if you have trouble locating your breath, you can breathe slightly harder once or twice. Until you feel the touch of your breath. And then return to natural breath, normal breath. Let the detail of your breath pull you in closer, closer into the present moment. If your breath is shallow, let it be shallow. If your breath is deep, let it be deep. If it's more in the left nostril, let it be the left nostril. If it's more in the right nostril, let it be the right nostril. Or if it's in both nostrils, let it be both. Notice the temperature of the incoming breath. Notice the temperature of the outgoing breath. And notice if there's a difference. Notice the pace of the incoming breath. Notice the pace of the outgoing breath. And notice if there's a difference. Notice the length of the incoming breath. Notice the length of the outgoing breath. And notice if there's a difference. Notice the pause at the end of your inhale. Notice the pause at the end of your exhale. And notice if there's a difference. Whenever you find that your mind has wandered, simply notice it. And without frustration, without dismay, without judgment, but with full acceptance, bring your attention back to the incoming and outgoing breath at the entrance of your nostrils. Natural breath. Normal breath. Observe your breath as it is, without wanting it to be different. And whenever you're ready, you can bring your attention back to the room that you're in, the surface that you're sitting on, weight of the clothes on your body, and gently blinking open your eyes. Noticing your peace, your presence, your awareness, the fidelity of your senses. We talked a lot about being in our body and connecting with our sensations, how to learn to allow them to arise and pass without judging them, without clinging or resisting, coming out of our head and living from our inner wisdom, our higher consciousness, letting the little human do its thing, but from a place of awareness, holding space for ourselves, recognizing our true being, our true nature, holding space for others, for where they are on their journey, learning to let yourself be, let the world be as it is, and then derive inspired action from that place. This is the technique we'll be learning at my upcoming 5-day retreat in India. For those, I saw some names who are already registered. For those who are not, please check out the India retreat. It's at the end of January 28th to February 1st, where we will take a deep dive and develop this technique of inner wisdom of sensations, sensation-based living, developing a strong tool that you can take out into the world, and so you can not lose yourself in the things and the distractions, but maintain your connection to Source. And with that, I want to thank everyone who joined, every familiar name and all new names. Welcome. Please join me every week, Saturday at the same time for Cirak Live. Again at cirak.com/live. And let's continue this journey together, stay connected, support each other, hold space for the experiences. Many of them can be challenging. Growth is challenging by definition, but it's a lot less stressful when we have others to hold us up, to remind us of our true essence, our connection to the greater consciousness, the source of, the ultimate source of love and belonging and trust and joy and the miracle of our existence and our time in our bodies. Heaven really is a place that can be cultivated on earth. Each and every one of us, we can do that for ourselves. We have to have the right environment, the right people, and life can be an incredible experience. I thank you all. Welcome you to join me next week, our weekly transmission. Until then, stay connected. Reach out with any questions through the contact form or info@cirak.com or through all the different social media handles at Cirak Teachings. You can always get in touch with me. See you then.